My son-in-law grabbed my toolbox off the porch and hurled it into the snowbank. "Take your junk and go," he shouted. "You're done sponging off us." My daughter stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, saying nothing. The door shut. The lock clicked. I thought that was the lowest point of my life until a stranger called me at 6 the next morning and said the words, "Mr. Halloway, this is about your brother. I'm grateful you're spending this time with me. Tell me in the comments, as my friend, where in the world you're listening from tonight." And before we go further, I should say some names and details in this story have been changed, and a few moments are shaped for the sake of the lesson inside them. But the truth in the middle of it is real enough for all of us. The toolbox hit the snow with a sound like a dropped anvil, metal on packed ice, wrenches and sockets scattering across the Hendersons' front yard. I stood on the porch in my undershirt in 11-degree weather and watched 40 years of tools disappear into the white. My son-in-law, Bryce, stood in the doorway behind me, chest heaving, a man who'd clearly been rehearsing this moment for a while and was relieved to finally get it out of his system. "You've been here 8 months, Roy," he said. 8 months of you underfoot, telling me how to fix the furnace, telling Melissa how to raise the kids. We're done." I turned around slowly. My hip doesn't love the cold, hasn't since the accident at the plant in '04. I looked past Bryce into the warm hallway light, searching for my daughter. Melissa was there, arms wrapped around herself, staring at a spot on the floor like it owed her money. "Missy," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "Just let me grab a coat. It's freezing." She didn't look up. "Dad, it's better this way. Bryce and I need our space back. The kids need routine." Bryce reached into his jacket and pulled out 3 folded $100 bills, held them out like he was tipping a valet. "There's a motel on Route 9. Should cover you a couple weeks." I'd spent 37 years running a machine shop out of a cinderblock building on 5th Street, built cabinetry and custom brackets for half the contractors in the county, and I had never once in my life taken a handout that felt the way those 3 bills felt in my palm. But it was 11 degrees and I was 68 years old, and my daughter was standing 10 feet away, choosing her husband's temper over her father's dignity. I took the money. "You're going to think about tonight for a long time, Bryce," I said. He didn't flinch. He shut the door. I heard the deadbolt turn. I got down on my knees in the snow, knees that screamed at me the whole way down, and started gathering wrenches with bare hands that had already gone numb. My late wife Carol's photograph, the one from our 30th anniversary, had landed face down in a drift. I picked it up and wiped the frost off the glass with my thumb. Her smile was still there, a little blurred where the moisture had crept in. "I know," I told her picture. "I know." I called a cab because my hands were shaking too hard to work the rideshare app. While I waited at the curb with my ruined toolbox and a duffel bag of clothes, I looked back at the house. The porch light clicked off. Then the living room window went dark. Then, just for a second, I saw Melissa's silhouette in the upstairs window. She looked down at me standing in the snow. Then, she pulled the curtain shut. That was the moment I understood something. Not that my daughter had picked her husband over me. I'd seen that train coming for months, ever since she'd started rolling her eyes when I asked about my mail. What I understood, standing in that snow at 9:45 on a Tuesday night, was that I had made a serious mistake 14 months earlier when I sold the house on Larkspur Street. Carol and I had bought that house the year Melissa started first grade. 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a garage I'd converted into a proper workshop with a lathe I'd hauled in myself. I'd spent 30 years fixing that place new roof in 9, rewired the whole first floor after the wiring started throwing breakers, built Melissa a treehouse in the maple out back that took me a whole summer. Carol used to say she loved that porch more than she loved her own sisters, and she wasn't entirely joking. After she passed, the house turned into a museum I couldn't walk through anymore. Her reading glasses still on the nightstand, her grocery list still stuck to the fridge, her handwriting there 11 months after the funeral because I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. Melissa said selling would be good for me, a fresh start, a chance for her to keep an eye on me. My old army buddy Frank had called me 3 separate times that spring, telling me he had a spare room and a fishing boat and more time on his hands than sense. I told him no every time. I wanted to believe family meant something more solid than a spare room. The cab dropped me at a boarding house on Delancey, run by a woman named Ruth Okafor, 60-some years old, sharp eyes, a handshake like a longshoreman's. She looked me over on her porch, soaking, frostbitten, dragging a busted toolbox, and didn't ask me a single question I didn't want to answer. "Room 4's at the top of the stairs," she said, pressing a key into my hand. "Radiator's loud, but it works. Breakfast's at 7 if you're up for it." "Yes, ma'am," I said. I could use a lot of things right about now. Room 4 had a narrow bed, a dresser with a lamp that leaned like it was tired, and a window looking out over a bare oak tree. I sat on the edge of the mattress and counted the $300 I had left in the world. Then I lay back and stared at a water stain on the ceiling shaped roughly like the state of Michigan. And I let myself think about the 8 months I'd spent under my daughter's roof. The first few weeks had been fine. Melissa fixed up the guest room with fresh sheets. My grandkids, Ava and Noah, used to pile onto my lap every morning wanting stories about the shop. Bryce was polite in that careful way people are polite when they're gritting their teeth through something. By the second month, the guest room had become a problem. Bryce's mother needed it for her visits. Could I just use the fold-out in the den for a while? The den became permanent by the 4th month. Then they needed the den for a home office, and there was a little room off the garage. Used to be storage, but they'd cleared it out mostly, just temporary, until they figured out the long-term plan. That room was 7 feet by 9, one window facing the fence line, a bare bulb on a pull string. I'd taped cardboard over the gap under the door to keep the draft out. "You're not exactly pulling your weight around here, Roy," Bryce told me one evening in the kitchen, a beer sweating in his hand. "Melissa and I are covering everything. Least you could do is make yourself useful." So I made myself useful. Shoveled the driveway all winter, fixed the garbage disposal, the leaking faucet, the screen door that never sat right on its hinges. I watched the kids 2-3 afternoons a week, so Melissa could get to her spin class, or wherever she went. Bryce started calling me the live-in handyman on the phone with his buddies loud, because the walls in that house were thin as paper. "At least he's good for something," he'd said once, laughing. I'd been in the storage room. I heard every word of it. Melissa never once corrected him. That was the part that hollowed me out worse than anything Bryce ever said out loud. His cruelty was loud and easy to hold at arm's length. Her silence got inside my chest and just sat there. I sat up in room 4 and looked at my frost-burned hands and understood, fully, for the first time, what I'd let happen. I'd sold Carol's house paid off free and clear since 2015, my name on the deed alone because I'd believed family was worth more than a piece of paper. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Frank's name. His last voicemail was from 7 weeks back. I'd listened to it twice and never called him back. "Hey, old man, it's me. Got a spare room and a boat that's getting jealous of the lake. Offer stands. Call me when you quit being so stubborn." I hadn't called him back. I set the phone face down and lay there, listening to the radiator knock through the wall. Then it buzzed against the dresser. I turned it over. Unknown number, but an area code I recognized the town where Frank had retired to, 3 hours north. I let it ring out. It buzzed again immediately. Same number. Every instinct told me it was spam, but there was something about 2 calls back to back, no gap for voicemail, that made the hair stand up on my arms. I answered. "Mr. Halloway? My name is David Pruitt. I'm an attorney up in Cedar Falls. I apologize for the hour I've been trying to reach you for several days." A pause I felt in my chest. "This concerns your brother, Frank." My stomach dropped straight through the floor. "Frank's not my brother," I said automatically. We're not blood. We were in the army together." "My apologies. His paperwork lists you as next of kin and sole beneficiary." "Mr. Halloway, I think it's best we speak in person. Are you free tomorrow afternoon?" I didn't sleep. I lay there, running Pruitt's voice over and over in my head, that particular careful steadiness people use when they're carrying something heavy across a room and don't want to drop it. By 6, I gave up on sleep and went down to Ruth's kitchen, where she already had coffee going and a tray of banana muffins that filled the whole first floor with a smell that briefly, almost, made the world feel survivable. "You look like a man with somewhere to be," she said, setting a mug down without asking. "Attorney's office," I said. "This afternoon." She made a small sound and refilled her own cup. Didn't push. It was one of the more comfortable silences I'd sat in for a long while. At 2 o'clock, I walked into Pruitt and Chase on Cedar Street. David Pruitt was maybe 55, gray at the temples, A handshake that told you he'd thought carefully about what a handshake should communicate. He sat me down, folded his hands, and didn't waste time. Frank Delgado passed away on the 14th. Heart attack in his sleep. It was fast. The room didn't spin the way I might have guessed. It just went very still, the way a room goes still after something can't be undone. Frank and I had met in basic training in 1976, two 19-year-olds arguing over whose bunk was closer to the latrine. He'd pulled me out of a burning transport truck outside Fort Benning during a training exercise gone wrong in '78. I still had the scar down my left forearm to prove it. After the service, he went into real estate while I went back to machining, and over the decades his little rental duplex turned into something neither of us had ever imagined back when we were 19 and broke. "I didn't know he was sick," I said, my voice smaller than I meant it. "Nobody told me. There were complications locating you," Pruitt said carefully. "Your last known address wasn't current." "You could say that." Pruitt opened a folder. "Mr. Delgado named you sole beneficiary of his estate. That includes 6 self-storage facilities across 2 counties, 4 residential rental properties, and a managed investment account. Total assessed value, as of his last review, is approximately $19.1 million. I heard the number. I understood the number. It landed somewhere outside of me, like sound coming through a wall. He was specific in his instructions," Pruitt continued, and lifted a small wooden box off the side of his desk, the size of a boot box. "Set it between us." My name was burned into the lid in block letters, Roy. Nothing else. Like there was only one Roy in the world who'd need to open it. "He asked that you open this alone when you're ready." "Why didn't he tell me he was sick?" I asked. "Why didn't he say something?" "He didn't want you coming out of guilt," Pruitt said gently. "He was clear on that point." "He called me 7 weeks ago," I said. "I didn't call him back." Pruitt didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I carried that box out to my truck and sat in the parking lot with it belted into the passenger seat like something that might slide if I took a corner too fast. I sat there a long time, afraid of what I might find. Back in room 4, under the tilted lamp, I lifted the lid. An envelope on top. My name, in Frank's blocky handwriting. Beneath it, the edge of photographs, papers. I opened the envelope carefully. The way you open something you know you only get to open once. 3 pages. Handwritten. "Roy, if you're reading this, they finally did what I always figured they'd do. I called you 3 times this year. Fall, Christmas, and once in March when you didn't pick up. I'm not saying that to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because I want you to understand I knew. I've watched that son-in-law of yours long enough to see which way the wind was blowing. I didn't want to be right. But you always did put more faith in family than most families deserve." I had to set it down and press both palms flat against the dresser until the burning behind my eyes let up enough to read again. "There's a bundle of letters in the bottom of the box, every one you ever sent me, going back to Benning. I kept every single one. There's a photo too, the one from the day we shipped out. You laughing at something dumb," I said. "Kept it in my wallet for 46 years. I lifted out the bundle, rubber band gone brittle with age. Dozens of them, 4 decades worth. On notebook paper, on the backs of invoices, a few on real stationery Carol had probably put in front of me because she was tired of me not writing. Beneath the letters, the photograph black and white, curled at the corners, 2 young soldiers grinning like idiots outside a barracks. I barely recognized my own face. On the back, in Frank's writing, "The day it started. Keep going." I had to press the back of my hand against my mouth. "One more thing in the box, wrapped in the cloth. That's the dog tag I was wearing the day you pulled me out of that truck. You probably remember it better than I do. I mostly remember the smoke and your voice telling me not to stop moving." I unwrapped the cloth. A dog tag, dented on one edge, chain still intact. On the back, scratched crudely, with something sharp. "Thank you for not letting me quit that day. Everything after was because of you." I sat in that wooden chair with the tag in one hand and the letter in the other, and I cried the ugly kind, shoulders shaking, the kind that comes from somewhere you didn't know was still that full. I was still sitting there when I heard something outside my door, a low, patient whine. I opened it and found a German shepherd, muzzle gone mostly gray, standing there with his tail moving in a slow, certain arc, like he'd been expecting me for a while. "Hey, old boy," I said, my voice rough. He walked forward and pressed his skull against my leg with his full weight, the way a dog does when he's already decided you're his. Pruitt appeared at the end of the hall, coat still on, leash in hand. Frank's instructions were specific, he said. He wanted Duke brought to you the same day, in person. His exact words, "The dog will know. Don't let anybody else do this part." We sat in room 4, me on the bed, Pruitt in the chair. Duke stretched across my feet and went through the estate. Storage facilities managed for 11 years by a man named Cal Whitfield, who knew the business cold. Rental properties, 3 occupied, 1 vacant. An investment portfolio managed by an advisor named Rene Castillo. Supervised probate, 6 to 9 months. Nothing transferable without court approval. Frank built this from a duplex he bought in 1985 with a VA loan, Pruitt said. He told me once he never would have had the nerve to sign that loan if a friend hadn't shown him some things are worth the risk. That's the truck, I said quietly. He wrote about that too. He told me the whole story, Pruitt said. Said you never once brought it up again after that day. Said that was the most decent thing anyone ever did for him, pulling him out and never making him feel like he owed you for it. I didn't have an answer. I pressed the back of my wrist against my burning eyes and let it burn. Word travels fast in a small town. Melissa called Sunday morning, before I'd even had coffee. I let it ring to voicemail. Then a text. "Dad, I heard about Mr. Delgado. Can we talk? I'm so sorry." 2 weeks earlier, she'd pulled a curtain shut on me, standing in the snow. Now she was sorry. At 11 that morning, I heard Bryce's leased Silverado pull into Ruth's driveway. I knew that engine anywhere. He never shut up about it. I stayed in my chair. Ruth answered the door because it was her house and nobody's drama was going to stop her answering her own door. Melissa stood on the porch with a casserole dish covered in foil, hair done, the kind of put together that takes 40 minutes on a Sunday and is meant to be noticed. "I made your favorite," she said. "Mom's chicken and dumplings." I looked at the dish. Carol had made that dish every winter Sunday for 30 years. And in my memory, Melissa had never once cooked it herself. She used to say she didn't have patience for anything that took longer than a phone call. "You made this," I said. I called Aunt Denise for the recipe. She pushed the dish toward me. "Can I come in?" "We can sit on the porch," I said. She sat with her hands folded like she was in a waiting room. "How are you doing? This place seems nice, but Dad, you shouldn't be in a boarding house. Come home. Bryce feels terrible about how things ended." My phone buzzed. Bryce. I answered it right in front of her. "Hey, Roy. Tough week, huh? Sorry to hear about your friend." "Good guy, from what Melissa says." A half-beat pause. "So how much did he actually leave you?" Not "how are you?" Not "are you okay?" 40 seconds of condolence before the actual question. "Still sorting it out with the lawyers," I said, and hung up. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a hard, stale dinner roll I'd taken from a gas station the night I got evicted my dinner that night, and every night since, riding around in my pocket for reasons I hadn't worked out yet. I set it on the little table between us. "The night you locked me out," I said, "this was my dinner." Melissa's face went through surprise, shame, and a fast retreat to neutral. "Dad, I'm keeping it," I said, and stood up and handed her back the dish. "Tell Bryce I'll be in touch about the estate. That's what you came to find out. Now you know." She stood there, holding the casserole against her chest, eyes bright with something that might have been tears or might have been anger. "That's not fair," she said. "No," I agreed. "It isn't." She called Thursday, 3 days running, always before 8 in the morning, which told me Bryce had her on a schedule. I finally picked up. "Dad, I just want us to sit down as a family. The kids miss you." That last part I believed completely. 6 o'clock, I said. The house smelled like pot roast and a plug-in air freshener. The good placemats were out, candles lit, which for a Thursday told me everything about how hard they were working at something. Bryce met me at the door with a grip a beat too long. "Really glad you came, Roy." Little Noah ran up and grabbed my leg. "Did you bring the dog?" "Not tonight, bud. But he says hi." Dinner was good. Melissa can cook when she puts her mind to it. 15 minutes in, Bryce started in on these estate attorneys and how his buddy at the gym had some real horror stories about probate dragging on. And if I ever wanted a second set of eyes, he and Melissa were happy to help. "I appreciate that," I said, in the tone of a man who appreciates things without acting on them. After the plates were cleared, I set the stale roll down on the white tablecloth, right next to the melted candles. My dinner the night I left, I said. Ate it alone in room 4. Funny thing, it still beats anything on this table tonight. The refrigerator hum got very loud. Bryce set his glass down hard enough that the sound carried. Melissa's jaw tightened, eyes going bright. Dad, that's not fair, she said. No, I said. It really isn't. I put the roll back in my pocket and stood. Thank you for dinner. Roast was good. Noah followed me to the door in his socks. Grandpa, can I talk to you outside? Out on the cold walk, he stood shivering, hands twisted together. Dad said something, he whispered. He said, if you don't sign the papers, I'm not supposed to call you Grandpa anymore. He said you were being difficult. Mom didn't say anything back. She just kept stirring the gravy. Something in my chest cracked clean down the middle. I got down on one knee, hips screaming the whole way. Nobody can make me stop being your grandpa, I told him. Not your dad, not anybody. That's not something that gets taken away. You hear me? He nodded against my shoulder, shaking. Go back inside. Put your shoes on, I told him. And don't tell your dad we talked. Not tonight. Can you do that? He nodded with the gravity of a 9-year-old who understood some things need protecting. I stood alone under a clear, cold sky and called Pruitt. David, I think it's time we set a trap. I was wondering when you'd call, he said. The next morning, Pruitt laid it out over coffee. They've already filed a guardianship petition. 4 days ago, the same week Melissa showed up with the casserole. He turned his legal pad toward me. Under this state's probate code, family can petition to have a court-appointed guardian assigned if they claim you lack capacity. They need you confused, dependent, easy to manage. That's what the dinners are for. He slid a small black recorder across the desk. This state allows one-party consent recording. Every conversation, every document, it all goes straight into a protected file. He'd already engaged an independent neuropsychologist, Dr. Elaine Farrow, for a competency evaluation that would go on record and torpedo their petition before it started. Frank built this estate specifically to be hard to challenge, Pruitt said. He told me once he had a friend too decent for his own good, and decency needed some legal architecture around it eventually. I slipped the recorder into my breast pocket. What do I do first? Call Melissa. Tell her maybe she was right, that you shouldn't be doing this alone. Tell her you want to come home. He held my gaze. Men like Bryce move fast when they think the window's open. That's when they get sloppy. I called Melissa from the parking lot. She picked up on the first ring, and the relief in her voice was pure and unguarded. Oh, Dad, I'm so glad you called. Pruitt didn't look up from his legal pad. The trap was open. Now we waited. Melissa had cleaned out the actual guest room this time. Fresh towels, a little vase of drugstore carnations, an investment, $4 worth of goodwill. Bryce met me in the hallway in a fleece vest, the Midwest uniform of a man performing relaxation. Good to have you back, Roy. This is how it should be. All this estate business, I said, letting some real tiredness into my voice. It's more than I expected. Makes my head swim. His shoulders eased by a fraction. Small, but I caught it. You shouldn't have to figure it out alone, he said. Why don't we sit down after dinner, go through some paperwork together? That'd be a real help, I said. That evening, Melissa started leaving a mug of chamomile tea on the counter every night, already poured, already steeping something extra underneath the smell I couldn't quite place. First 2 nights I drank it and woke up groggy, slower than usual, thick-headed in a way I wasn't used to. I mentioned it to Pruitt on my next visit. He went very still. Don't drink anything you haven't made yourself. Starting tonight. Thursday morning, Bryce set a manila folder on the table between our coffee cups. Had my buddy Todd put this together. He handles business law downtown. Just an overview of what durable power of attorney would look like. It wasn't an overview. It was the finished document, 14 pages. Signature tabs already stuck on with little yellow arrows. Full authority over every account, every property. No dollar limits. No requirement that I even be told before money moved. Can I hold on to this a few days? I asked. Eyes aren't what they used to be. Of course, Bryce said, smile not quite reaching his eyes. No rush. Pruitt read all 14 pages without a word, then set it down flat. This is aggressive. No transaction limits, no co-signature, no notification. If you'd signed this, They could have drained every account inside 30 days, and there'd be nothing the probate court could do fast enough to stop it. He tapped the firm letterhead. Whoever drafted this specializes in elder exploitation. I'll find out who. Saturday morning, a man in a gray overcoat showed up, introduced by Bryce as Marcus Vance, financial consultant, helps families through estate transitions. Vance laid out a bound document he called a Family Asset Protection Agreement, 12 pages of reassuring language that, underneath the jargon, moved every asset into a jointly administered trust with Bryce and Melissa as sole trustees. No court oversight. No way for me to undo it once signed. How long have you been doing this kind of work? I asked. Going on 11 years, he said, smooth as anything. I asked to keep a copy for my doctor. A small flicker crossed his face recalculation. Not alarm before he agreed. Pruitt called 20 minutes after I sent him the photos. Marcus Vance holds no license with the state licensing board. None. He's not a consultant, Roy. He's a man Bryce hired to produce a document designed to move your money outside court supervision. That's fraud. And combined with the drugging, it's felony-level elder exploitation. We have enough. Enough for what? To bring in investigators. Adult Protective Services and the DA's Financial Crimes Unit have both been briefed. They're ready to move whenever you say the word. I thought about Frank's back porch, the lake, the empty dock. I have an idea about where I want this to end. I sent a sample of the tea to a private lab. 6 days later, the results came back. Lorazepam, a prescription sedative, consistent with repeated low-dose administration over several weeks. Exactly the profile of a man who looks like he's losing his edge. Exactly what a rush doctor's evaluation might mistake for. Incapacity. This is criminal, Roy, Pruitt said. Administering a controlled substance without consent is a felony here, on top of the elder abuse statute. It's all going in the file. I asked him to set the final piece for Frank's old lake house, a low, gray-shingled place on the water with a wide back lawn and a dock Frank had rebuilt with his own hands 3 summers running. I wanted people there who'd actually shown up for me, Ruth, who'd handed me a key without asking questions. A nurse named Priya Anand from the free clinic who'd spent her lunch break helping me untangle my insurance after my card still had my old address on it. Cal Whitfield, who'd run Frank's storage lots for 11 years and knew him better than most family ever gets to know each other. And Melissa and Bryce, invited as family, told it was a small gathering to honor Frank. I want them to come thinking they've won, I told Pruitt. I want Melissa to bring that tea herself. That works, he said. APS can come through the side gate at 2, once everyone's settled. What do you want to do about the tea? I'm going to hand it to Bryce, I said. The morning of the gathering, I stood at Frank's kitchen window at first light, with Duke leaning against my leg, watching the sky go from black to that particular gray-blue that comes right before dawn. Cal showed up at 8 with 2 of his crew and got the grill going on the back lawn without much conversation, the way men do who've spent years just getting things done. Ruth arrived with 2 pies and her good coat, looked the property over like she was grading it. Frank kept this place up, she said. I'm going to try, I told her. Priya came straight from a shift, still in scrubs under her coat, and sat on the back steps with Duke's head in her lap, like she'd always belonged there. Pruitt arrived at 11:30 with a sealed envelope, the toxicology report, transcripts, the power of attorney, the fake consultant's fraudulent paperwork, the guardianship filing, and the preliminary APS report. Everything's here, he said quietly. Detective Marsh and her partner come through the side gate at 2. They'll hold back until you signal. At noon, Melissa and Bryce came through the gate. Melissa carrying a casserole and smiling the smile she used when she needed a room to like her. Bryce with a bottle of wine and a grin for everybody. Behind them, Melissa held a thermal carafe with both hands. I made tea, she called out brightly. Dad loves it before a big meal. I watched Bryce work the yard for the first hour, shaking hands, laughing loud, playing the attentive son-in-law with a fluency that told me he'd been practicing this role his whole adult life. Melissa moved through quieter, a hand on someone's arm, a warm word better at this than Bryce, genuinely. And watching her, I felt the particular ache of knowing what she could have been. At 1:15, Melissa carried the carafe over and poured tea into my empty mug. You haven't had any. This'll warm you up. Thank you, sweetheart, I said. I took the mug in both hands, walked it straight over to where Bryce stood by the grill with Cal, and held it out. Bryce. Melissa made tea. You've been on your feet all morning. Something crossed his face, there and gone in under a second. His eyes cut to the mug, then to me, then across the yard to Melissa. He was working out whether there was any way to say no that wouldn't look strange in front of Cal and everybody else in earshot. There wasn't. Thanks, Roy, he said, and drank. 8 minutes later, Cal said something that needed an answer, and what came out of Bryce's mouth wasn't the word he meant to say. His hand went for the mug on the side table and missed the grip he expected. You all right? Cal asked. Fine, Bryce said, and it came out soft and sideways, his eyes gone heavy at the corners. The yard went quiet by degrees, the way a room goes quiet when everybody can see something happening but nobody's named it yet. Melissa stared at Bryce from across the lawn, hands pressed flat against her thighs, going pale. I set the carafe down where everyone could see it and looked around at the faces on Frank's back lawn. Cal, who'd run those storage lots for 11 years. Ruth, who'd handed me a key without one question. Priya, who'd sat on hold with an insurance company for 20 minutes of her own time so I could get my blood pressure medication. David Pruitt stood near the dock, hands in his coat pockets, watching. 2 weeks ago, I said, and my voice carried without needing to rise. My daughter and her husband put me out of their house in 11-degree weather with $300 and a broken toolbox. Today they came back with a casserole and a bottle of wine and this tea. I held up the carafe. This tea has been in my home every evening for 3 weeks. Twice I drank it. Both times I was asleep within the hour, confused in ways I'm not usually confused. I opened the envelope and held up the first page so the light caught it. A licensed lab in the city confirmed this tea contains lorazepam. Giving that to someone without their knowledge is a felony in this state. Melissa made a sound that wasn't a word. Bryce straightened against the table, adrenaline fighting the sedative, and what came out of him was noise, not language. Every word you say right now, I told him quietly, touching my breast pocket once, is being recorded. His mouth shut. I laid the second document down. This is the power of attorney your friend Todd drafted. No limits, no oversight, full control of everything. The third. This is the asset protection agreement Marcus Vance presented on your behalf. He holds no license in this state. I checked. David checked. So has the district attorney's office. The fourth. This is the guardianship petition you two filed 4 days after Melissa first showed up at Ruth's with a casserole the same week you were offering to help me through the estate. I looked at Melissa. You filed it on a Tuesday. You brought the casserole on a Friday. She made a sound that started as a denial and folded into something else, bent forward at the waist, grabbing the table. Dad, please. I know how it looks. I was scared. Bryce said the bills were killing us, that this was the only way to get stable. I never wanted to hurt you. You never wanted to hurt me, I said, but you stood in that kitchen and heard your husband tell your 9-year-old son he couldn't call me grandpa unless I signed papers, and you kept stirring the gravy. Her legs buckled. Bryce stepped forward, jaw set, fury pushing through the sedative. You set us up. You humiliated us in front of strangers. You're a vindictive old man who never gave his own family a chance. No, I said. I gave my family 8 months. I fixed your disposal and your screen door and slept in a room with a draft through the wall and never once complained. I didn't set a trap, Bryce. I just stopped moving out of the way and let you walk into the one you built yourselves. The side gate opened at exactly 2. Detective Marsh came through first, unhurried, the way people move when they've done this many times and don't need to announce themselves. Mr. Halloway, I believe you have something for me. I handed her the envelope. She looked at the documents, at Bryce, at Melissa, still holding the table edge. You need to come with us, she told Bryce, plain and level. We have some questions. Melissa was crying the way you cry once every performance you've been holding runs out. Dad, she whispered. You're welcome to call your kids whenever you like, I told her. None of this is theirs to carry. Go home, Melissa. Get a lawyer. Take care of Ava and Noah. She let go of the table and walked to the gate without looking back. Bryce went 2 minutes later, hands at his sides, something behind his eyes gone very quiet, the way things go quiet in a man who's finally understood the size of what he's standing in. The gate closed. The yard was still. Duke crossed the grass and sat on my feet. Monday morning, I renewed my room at Ruth's for another 6 months. She looked at the check, then at me. You know you could afford something a whole lot nicer. I know, I said. I'd walked through every room of Frank's lake house, sat in his kitchen chair with my coffee, tried to feel whether it fit. It was a good house, but every time I sat in it, I felt like a guest waiting on the owner to come home, and the owner wasn't coming home. Room 4 had been mine since the first night, the tilted lamp, the Michigan-shaped water stain, the radiator that knocked through the wall, the particular geography of a life I'd rebuilt from nothing. I wasn't ready to trade it just because I finally could. Melissa called on a Wednesday in March. I was at Frank's original storage lot with Cal, going over lease renewals at 68 years old like a man learning a new trade. "How's Noah?" I asked, before she could say anything else. "He made the travel soccer team," she said, voice stripped down to something real, something I hadn't heard clearly in a long time. "Dad, I'm not calling about the money. I just wanted to know you're okay." "I'm okay," I said. "What are you keeping it for?" she asked quietly. "If you're still in that little room?" I looked out the office window at Cal helping a customer, easy and familiar in his own skin. "So I know who comes looking for me when I'm still just a man in a small room," I said. She was quiet a moment. "Okay, Dad," she finally said. "Okay." In April, David and I filed the paperwork to start the Frank Delgado Trade Scholarship, a nonprofit funding vocational training for kids across the county who wanted to go into machining, electrical work, the trades neither of us had ever thought of as lesser than anything else. Cal came to the filing meeting and brought 2 of his longest-serving guys, and we spent the first hour just talking about Frank before we ever touched the paperwork. Best hour I'd spent in a lawyer's office in my life. On a Saturday in late spring, I drove out to each of Frank's properties, not to inspect anything, just to be there, to shake hands with the people who'd kept the lights on, because Frank hired well and treated people right, and they'd given it back to him tenfold. At the last stop, the original duplex he'd bought with that VA loan, Cal walked me around back to where Frank used to park his truck. "He talked about you," Cal said. "Not often, but when he did, it was always the same. My buddy Roy. And then whatever came next, like your name was just part of the point he was making." I didn't have an answer for that. I pressed my hand flat against the cold brick and held it there a while. That evening I sat on Frank's dock with Duke beside me, both of us facing the water in the last gray light. I took the dog tag out of my coat pocket and turned it over, read the scratched engraving one more time. "Thank you for not letting me quit that day. Everything after was because of you." I'd spent 46 years thinking I hadn't done anything special. A burning truck, 30 seconds of instinct. Frank had spent 46 years building 6 storage lots and 4 rental properties, and a managed portfolio, and a scholarship fund that didn't exist yet but would, all because of an afternoon at Fort Benning I'd filed away as nothing at all. I put the tag around my neck. Not because I'd decided to keep it, I'd always been going to keep it. I put it on because it was spring and Duke was leaning his whole warm weight into my leg, and Frank had been right about everything, and it was past time I started wearing the proof of it. Duke lifted his head and looked at me. "You know what he'd say right now," I told him. His tail moved once, slow and certain. He'd say, "Quit sitting around, old man. There's still work to do." I stood up. My hip complained the way it always does. I looked out at the water and the dock and the last of the light going pink over the tree line. And then I went inside and got back to work. People ask me sometimes what I took away from all this. I tell them the same thing every time. Blood isn't a contract. Loyalty shows up in what people do when you have nothing to give them, not in what they say the moment you suddenly have everything. I stayed in room 4 longer than I needed to, because I wanted to be certain, and I was right to wait. The people who knocked on my door when I was nobody, Ruth, Priya, Cal, those were my family. The people who came running the moment they heard the number 19 million. Well, that story tells itself. If I could go back and tell my younger self one thing, it'd be this. Don't sell the house your wife loved and move into somebody else's space, hoping proximity will manufacture love that was never really there. Real family doesn't need you nearby. Real family finds you wherever you land. I'm not a bitter man. I still believe the right people get put in front of you at the right moment, if you're paying attention. Frank was proof of that. So was an old German shepherd who leaned his head against my leg in a boarding house hallway and decided, right then, that I was worth staying with. This has been a story about revenge that was never really about revenge at all. It was about learning, late but not too late, who actually deserved a seat at my table. If something in this reached you, tell me in the comments. As my friend whose loyalty surprised you the most, one way or the other. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it tonight, and stay close, because there's more of these stories where this one came from. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It means more than you'd think.